The sky was dark and the ocean was calm when the first alarm sounded on the USS Horizon. Captain Nathan Cooper was sleeping in his quarters when the red light above his bunk started flashing. He had been in the Navy for 23 years, and he knew that sound meant something very bad was happening. Nathan jumped out of his bed and pulled on his uniform as fast as he could. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. This was what he trained for his whole life. He ran through the narrow hallways of the submarine toward the control room. Other sailors were already moving in the same direction. They did not talk or waste time with questions. Everyone knew their job and moved quickly to get there. The submarine was like a living thing, and every person was an important part of its body. When Nathan reached the control room, his executive officer, Lieutenant Daniel Foster, was already standing at the sonar station. Daniel was young but smart, and he had worked with Nathan for 4 years. The look on Daniel's face told Nathan that something strange was happening in the ocean. Very strange. "Captain, we are getting signals that do not match anything in our database," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but Nathan could see the worry in his eyes. "There are multiple large objects moving in the water. They are moving like nothing we have ever seen before." "How many?" Nathan asked. "We count at least 20 objects, maybe more." "They are big, sir. Really big. And they are diving deep," Daniel replied. Nathan moved closer to the sonar screen. The little dots of light did not look like whales or submarines from any country he knew. The shapes were all wrong. The way they moved was all wrong. The speed was impossible. He had seen many things in his career, but he had never seen anything like this. Within minutes, Nathan received an emergency message from Naval Command. The message was short but shocking. Unidentified vessels had been spotted all over the world's oceans. They were not human. They were not from any country on Earth. The military was calling it an invasion from space. Nathan read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. This could not be real, but the sonar did not lie. Something was out there in the ocean and it was not human. The orders were clear. All submarines should move to defensive positions and wait for more orders. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Daniel said, but he did not sound like he believed it. Nathan looked at his young officer and understood what he was feeling. They all felt it, fear and excitement at the same time. This was beyond anything they had trained for. This was the moment that changed everything. The captain decided to take the USS Horizon to a better position to observe these unknown objects. He wanted to see them with his own sonar equipment, to understand what they were before anything else happened. The submarine moved slowly and quietly through the dark water. This was what submarines did best. They were invisible hunters, and now they needed to hunt something new. Hours passed. The unknown objects were moving toward the coast. Nathan watched them carefully on the sonar screen. They were organized. They were moving in a pattern. This was not random. Someone or something was controlling them with purpose. Then a message came through all the radio frequencies. It was in English, but the voice was strange and cold. The message said that the ocean belonged to a species called the Kirin. It said that the Kirin had decided to take Earth's oceans as their new home. Any humans who tried to stop them would be destroyed. The message said humans had 48 hours to leave all coastal cities, or the Kirin would make them leave by force. The radio went silent after the message ended. Nathan's crew looked at each other. No one knew what to say. This was real. It was actually happening. Aliens had come to Earth and they wanted the oceans. A feeling of fear moved through the submarine. But it was mixed with something else too. It was purpose. Nathan's sailors were warriors and now they had an enemy to fight. "All crew listen to me," Nathan said, and everyone stopped what they were doing to hear him. "We do not know what is coming, but we know who we are. We are submariners. We know the ocean. We know how to move in darkness. We know how to fight where others cannot. This is our time. This is what we have trained for. When the orders come, we will be ready." The crew was quiet for a moment and then they nodded. They were scared, but they were also brave. They were ready. Nathan sent his own message to Naval Command. He reported what his sonar had found. He told them the objects were moving toward the coast and that the submarine was in a good position to watch them. He waited for orders. The orders came quickly. The USS Horizon was to move to a new position and maintain contact with the unknown vessels. Other submarines were doing the same thing all around the world. The Navy was getting ready for war, and it was a war unlike any war in human history. As the USS Horizon moved quietly through the black water, Nathan stood in the control room and looked at the sonar screen. The unknown objects kept coming. They moved like they owned the ocean already, like they had no fear, like they had no idea what was waiting for them in the dark. What they did not know was that they were in a place where humans had been fighting and surviving for centuries. The ocean was not a new place for humanity. Humans had sailed these waters, fished these waters, and fought in these waters. Humans knew the ocean in ways that these aliens could never know it. And somewhere deep below the surface, in submarines that moved like silent ghosts, human sailors were getting ready to show the Chiron that the ocean had already been claimed. The ocean belonged to those who understood it, and humanity understood it very well. Nathan looked at his crew, at their young faces and their brave hearts. He thought about their families back home. He thought about all the people in the coastal cities who did not know yet what was coming. He thought about all of humanity, waiting for someone to stop this invasion. The submarines would stop it. They had to, because if they did not, nothing else would. The USS Horizon moved forward into the darkness, following the alien ships, waiting for the war to begin. Nathan Cooper was ready. His crew was ready, and humanity's greatest battle, fought in silence beneath the waves, was about to start. The war started on a Tuesday morning when Captain Marcus Halifax gave the order to fire. His submarine, the USS Nevada, was positioned near the mid-Atlantic ridge, a place where the ocean floor rose up like a mountain hidden beneath the water. Marcus had been waiting for 3 days, listening to the alien ships move around the ocean. He knew they would come this way. He had studied the patterns. He had learned how the Chiron moved and where they liked to go. Marcus was 47 years old, and he had commanded submarines for 15 years. He was not a man who made mistakes. He was not a man who got scared easily. But watching the alien ships move through his sonar screen filled him with a feeling he had never experienced before. These things were not submarines from Russia or China. These things were from somewhere else entirely. They moved with a smooth, easy grace that no human machine could match. The 3 Chiron bioships were moving in a formation that looked like they were searching for something. Marcus guessed they were looking for human submarines. The Chiron commander wanted to eliminate the threat from the sea so he could focus on destroying the cities on land. Marcus had other ideas. He waited until the moment was perfect. His crew had been training for years to fight enemy submarines. They knew how to hide, how to wait, and how to strike when the enemy least expected it. The ocean was dark and the submarines were darker. The Chiron had good sensors, but they did not know how to use them in the way that human submariners had learned. Fire, Marcus said quietly into the communication system. 3 torpedoes shot out of the USS Nevada like arrows from a bow. They moved fast through the water, heading toward the first Chiron ship. The alien vessel had sensors, but the sensors did not work the same way as human sonar. The Chiron technology was looking for things that were different from what human weapons actually were. This was the key to human survival. The submarines were not what the aliens expected. The first torpedo hit the alien ship with a massive explosion. The sound of it echoed through the water like thunder. The bioluminescent ship lit up with blue and green light as its outer shell cracked and broke. Water rushed inside. The Chiron crew tried to save their ship, but it was too late. The alien vessel sank into the darkness, taking its crew with it. The other 2 Chiron ships tried to escape. One moved up toward the surface. One moved down toward the deeper water. Marcus had expected both reactions. He had positioned other submarines to intercept them. The humans had learned the first rule of submarine warfare. Never fight alone when you can use your friends to help you. Captain Derek Hughes commanded the USS Archer, and he was waiting for the alien ship that was heading deeper. When the Chiron vessel passed through his zone, Derek fired his own torpedoes. The alien captain tried to turn away, but submarines were faster than he realized. The second Chiron ship exploded in a burst of light and sound. The third ship was moving toward the surface to escape. It was trying to get to where human submarines could not follow. But Captain Lisa Martinez in the USS Columbia was waiting at a shallower depth. She had studied the Chiron ship movements for weeks. She knew they would try to escape to the top of the water. She was ready. Lisa's torpedoes did not miss. The third Chiron ship took damage but managed to limp away, heading back toward the main Chiron fleet. 1 alien vessel escaped, but 2 were destroyed. It was a victory for humanity, but Marcus knew it was just the beginning. Within hours, messages came from submarines all around the world. The same thing was happening everywhere. Human submarines were attacking the Kirin fleet. In the Pacific, submarines were sinking alien ships. In the Indian Ocean, more Kirin vessels were being destroyed. The aliens had come to conquer Earth, but they had not counted on submarines. The Kirin commander, a being named Vasek, received reports of his destroyed ships. He was angry, but he was also confused. His technology was superior. His ships were larger and stronger. His weapons could destroy cities. But something about the ocean made his advantages disappear. The humans were winning battles they should not be able to win. Vasek called his officers together and looked at the battle reports. His forces had been in Earth's oceans for only 1 week, and already he had lost more ships than he had expected to lose in the entire war. The humans were not fighting like most species fought. They were not attacking his main fleet. They were being sneaky. They were using the water itself as a weapon. These humans are cunning, Vasek said to his officers. They hide in the dark water. They strike from places where we cannot see them. We must adapt our tactics or this conquest will take much longer than we calculated. One of his officers, a younger Kirin named Keth, spoke carefully. Perhaps we should send deeper scouts. We should understand the ocean better before we continue the main assault. Vasek was beginning to realize that conquering an ocean was very different from conquering a planet. He had expected the humans to fight in the open, where his superior technology would win the day. Instead, the humans had chosen to fight in a way that took away his advantages. They were smart, they were organized, and they were fighting for their home. Back aboard the USS Nevada, Marcus was receiving orders from Admiral Catherine Moore. The admiral had been promoted to command all submarine operations. She was the first woman to hold such a position, and she was very good at her job. Admiral Moore had spent her whole military career studying underwater warfare. Now was her time to use everything she knew. All submarines will maintain contact with the Kirin vessels. Admiral Moore's voice came through the communication system. Do not take unnecessary risks, but do not let them establish a stable position either. We need to keep them moving. We need to disrupt their plans. We need to make them understand that they cannot win this war. Marcus heard the determination in the admiral's voice. She was a fighter. She believed that humanity could win. And her belief was spreading to every submarine in the ocean. The crews believed too. They had tasted victory. They had destroyed enemy ships. They had proven that human submarines could fight alien invaders and win. Over the next few days, more battles happened. Some submarines were damaged. Some crews lost sailors to the fighting, but the submarines kept attacking. They kept sinking Kirin ships. They kept disrupting the alien invasion plans. The Kirin had come expecting to conquer the oceans easily. Instead, they found themselves in a war they had not planned for. The submarines were becoming famous among the Kirin as phantom hunters. The alien sailors whispered about the human ships that appeared from nowhere and disappeared into darkness. They told stories about the submarines that could not be defeated. The Kirin realized they were fighting an enemy that understood the ocean in ways they never would. On the surface, in the cities near the coasts, people heard the news about submarines fighting aliens beneath the waves. They did not know all the details. They did not know the names of all the captains. But they knew that their defenders were fighting for them. They knew that somewhere in the dark water, brave people were willing to die to keep them safe. This knowledge gave people hope. And hope was something humanity needed if they were going to survive this invasion. The submarines had become more than military ships. They had become symbols of human courage and determination. They had become the guardians of humanity in Earth's oceans. 3 weeks had passed since the Kirin invasion began, and everything had changed. The submarines kept winning battles. The aliens kept losing ships. The ocean had become a graveyard of Kirin vessels, and humanity was starting to believe they might actually survive this terrible attack from space. Captain Nathan Cooper stood in the control room of the USS Horizon and looked at the latest battle reports. In just 21 days, the combined human submarine fleet had destroyed 43 Kirin bioships and 5 major weapons platforms. The number seemed impossible, but the evidence was there on every sonar screen and in every combat report. Nathan had been promoted to Commodore, which meant he now coordinated submarine operations across the entire Atlantic Ocean. He worked from a command center on land now, but he still felt the submarine in his blood. He understood what it meant to move silently through water, to wait in darkness to strike when the enemy was not ready. This was the knowledge that was winning the war. The turning point had come when the submarines began to truly understand the Kirin technology. Nathan's team of engineers and scientists had studied captured Kirin equipment and figured out how their sensors worked. The alien sensors used a different frequency than human sonar. The Kirin ships moved in different ways than submarines moved. These differences became advantages for the human forces. Submarine captains across the world were now using the same basic tactics. They would hide in underwater canyons or behind underwater mountains. They would stay completely silent, not moving, barely breathing. When Kirin ships came close, the submarines would wait for the perfect moment. Then they would fire. By the time the Kirin realized what was happening, it was too late. The human weapons were already moving through the water toward them. Commander Vasek was receiving bad news every single day. His commanders were telling him that the human submarines were like ghosts. They appeared and disappeared. They moved in ways that seemed impossible. They had destroyed more than half of his initial invasion fleet. And the worst part was that Vasek could not destroy them back. He could not find them. He could not hit them. He could not win. Vasek called an emergency meeting with his war council. His officers stood around him in his command ship, the Eternal Depths, and they all looked worried. The Kirin commander had expected this invasion to be quick and simple. Conquer the oceans. Destroy some human cities. Make the humans surrender. It should have taken 3 weeks. But it had already taken 3 weeks and the humans were still fighting. They were not surrendering. They were getting better at fighting with each day that passed. We must change our strategy, said a Kirin officer named Theron. The humans have superior knowledge of submarine warfare. We brought technology for fighting in the open ocean, not for hiding and hunting in small tactical groups. Vasek knew Theron was right, but he did not want to admit it. The Kirin had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never faced an enemy like this. They had never faced an enemy that knew the ocean better than they did. Another officer, a female Kirin named Rena, spoke up with a different idea. Perhaps we should destroy all the human submarines we can find, and then go back to attacking the cities. If we destroy enough submarines, the humans will have to surrender or watch their cities burn. But Vasek knew that plan would not work either. The submarines were too good at hiding. They would not all come out to fight in the open. And even if some did, there were too many submarines and too many oceans. The humans had been preparing for submarine warfare for more than 100 years. They had submarines everywhere. The Kirin commander realized something that was very difficult for him to accept. He was losing. Not just losing battles, but losing the war. His supply lines stretched millions of miles back to the Kirin homeworld. Reinforcements would take months to arrive. The humans, meanwhile, could repair their submarines in just days. The human factories could build new weapons and ammunition constantly. The humans had the advantage of being on their own planet. In the Pacific, something even worse was happening. A group of submarines led by Captain Paul Garrity had discovered a major Kirin biological transport ship. This ship was carrying thousands of Kirin soldiers in suspended animation. These soldiers were meant to be the invasion force that would land on the continents after the oceans were secured. But the submarines found the transport first. Paul Garrity and his captains worked together in a coordinated attack. They moved quietly through the deep water, staying hidden from the Kirin sensors. The transport ship had defensive weapons, but it was slow and not designed for combat. It was built to carry soldiers, not to fight submarines. When the submarines attacked, the transport did not stand a chance. Missiles came from multiple directions. The Kirin did not even have time to raise an alarm. In less than 5 minutes, the transport ship was destroyed. 20,000 Kirin soldiers died without ever knowing that Earth existed. They died in their sleep, never waking up to see the world they were supposed to conquer. When Vasek heard about the transport ship, he felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. He felt defeated, not just tactically defeated, but defeated in spirit. If the humans could destroy a major transport ship, they could destroy anything. His invasion had become a disaster. At the same time, Nathan Cooper was receiving reports of victories from submarines all across the world. In the Indian Ocean, submarines were hunting Kirin research vessels. In the Arctic, submarines were destroying Kirin communication stations. In the Mediterranean, submarines were sinking Kirin supply ships. The human forces were not just defending anymore. They were attacking. They were taking the fight to the Chiron. Admiral Catherine Moore made a strategic decision that would change the war forever. She ordered all submarines to begin searching for Chiron supply lines. The alien ships had to bring supplies from space, and those supplies had to travel through the ocean to reach the Chiron forces. If the submarines could destroy these supply ships, the Chiron invasion would fail. The aliens could not fight without ammunition, without food, without water, without all the things an army needed to survive. The submarines began hunting supply convoys. This was a new kind of warfare. Not just fighting enemy combat ships, but destroying the lines that kept an army alive. It was brutal and effective. Within 2 weeks, every Chiron supply convoy that tried to reach the invasion fleet was destroyed. The Chiron forces began to run short on ammunition. They began to have less power for their ships. They began to understand that they were trapped. Vasek realized that the invasion had changed from a conquest into a battle for survival. The humans were not just defending their oceans anymore. They were destroying the Chiron ability to stay on Earth, and there was nothing he could do about it. His forces were losing, and more forces would not arrive for months. By the time reinforcements came, the invasion would be over. In the cities on land, people began to celebrate. The news came that the Chiron invasion was failing. The submarines were winning. Humanity was going to survive. The people did not understand all the details of submarine warfare. They did not know the names of all the captains and officers, but they knew that human courage and human intelligence had defeated an alien invader. They knew that the submarines had saved their world. Nathan stood in the command center and looked at the maps showing where all the submarines were positioned. He saw the red marks where Chiron ships had been destroyed. He saw the blue marks where human submarines were waiting and hunting. He understood what was happening. The Chiron had come to conquer Earth, but they had made a terrible mistake. They had come to the ocean, not knowing that the ocean belonged to humanity. The submarines had proven it. And now the whole world knew that humanity could fight and win, even against enemies from the stars. Commander Vasek stood in the center of his flagship and looked at the reports of his remaining forces. The numbers were terrible. He had started the invasion with 120 bioships. Now he had 37. He had started with 50,000 soldiers ready for combat. Now he had maybe 15,000 alive and in good condition. The rest were either dead or injured. The Chiron invasion had become a catastrophe, and Vasek knew he had to make a decision that would change everything. In a meeting room deep inside the eternal depths, Vasek called together his remaining commanders. They were all tired and scared. They all understood what was happening. The humans were winning. The submarines kept coming. The Chiron kept losing. There seemed to be no end to it. Vasek looked at his officers and spoke with a quiet voice. "We cannot win this war," he said. "I know this is difficult to hear. I know this is not what any of us expected. But the facts are clear. The humans understand this ocean better than we do. They have weapons that are better adapted for underwater combat than ours. They have more submarines than we can destroy, and every day that passes, more of our soldiers die and more of our ships are lost." One of his commanders, a Chiron named Keth, spoke carefully. She was young for a commander, but she was smart and she was not afraid to speak her thoughts. "What do you suggest, sir? Do you want to surrender?" Vasek closed his eyes for a moment. Surrender was not something that Chiron commanders did easily. The Chiron were proud warriors. They had conquered many worlds. The idea of surrendering to humans was almost too much to accept. But Vasek was also a pragmatic leader. He understood that sometimes the best way to save your people was to admit you had lost and make peace. "I want to contact the human commanders," Vasek said. "I want to discuss terms. I want to see if the humans will allow us to leave this world with honor, instead of continuing to fight until we are all dead." The Chiron officers looked at each other with mixed feelings. Some were relieved. Some were angry. Some were sad. But they all understood that Vasek was right. The invasion was over. It had failed. Now they had to figure out how to survive. Back on Earth, Commodore Nathan Cooper was receiving a strange message. It came through all the communication frequencies. It was from Commander Vasek, and he was asking for a meeting to discuss peace. Nathan could not believe what he was hearing. The aliens wanted to surrender. After 3 weeks of brutal fighting, the Chiron commander was willing to give up. Nathan immediately contacted Admiral Catherine Moore and reported what had happened. The Admiral listened carefully and then made a decision. "Set up a meeting," she said, "but do it carefully. We do not know if this is a trick or if it is real. Send 3 submarines to guard the meeting place. If the Kirin try anything, we will be ready. The meeting was set for a location near the Puerto Rico Trench, one of the deepest places in all of Earth's oceans. Commodore Nathan Cooper decided to go himself. He wanted to look Commander Vasek in the eye. He wanted to understand if the alien was being honest about wanting peace. Nathan boarded a special submarine designed for diplomatic missions. It had large windows so he could see outside. As the submarine descended into the deep water, Nathan thought about everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, an alien fleet had arrived and declared war on humanity. Now that same fleet was asking for peace. It was almost impossible to believe, but it was happening. When Nathan's submarine reached the meeting point, he could see the eternal depths in the distance. The alien flagship was damaged and slow, but it was still floating. 2 other Kirin ships were with it. These would be Vasek's guards, just like Nathan's submarines were his guards. The submarines came together slowly and carefully. Then Nathan waited inside his submarine, while Vasek and 3 of his officers used a special transport pod to come to Nathan's vessel. The aliens had never been inside a human submarine before. Their eyes were wide as they looked around. The submarine was small and crowded compared to their ships, but it was designed for combat and survival, not for comfort. Nathan shook hands with Vasek. It was strange to touch an alien, to feel the smooth skin and the long fingers. But Nathan was a soldier, and he treated Vasek with respect. 2 enemies meeting to end a war. Commander Vasek, Nathan said. I am Commodore Nathan Cooper. I represent the United States Navy and the human forces fighting to protect Earth. Commodore Cooper, Vasek replied in careful English. I represent the Kirin Empire and what remains of the invasion fleet. I have come to discuss the end of this war. They sat in a small room inside the submarine. Nathan offered Vasek water, but the alien could not drink human water. Instead, they just talked. Your submarines are remarkable, Vasek said. I have never seen anything like them. They move like living creatures. They hide like ghosts. My commanders tell me they cannot be detected until it is too late to defend against them. You have defeated us, Commodore. I admit this. Nathan nodded. He understood what it cost Vasek to say these words. Your ships are advanced, Nathan replied. Your weapons are powerful. But you did not know this ocean. This ocean is home to humanity. We have sailed these waters for thousands of years. We know every current, every sound, every shadow. When you came here, you came to a place where we had all the advantages. Vasek was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. I request permission to withdraw my remaining forces from Earth. I will take my ships and my surviving soldiers back to my world. I will not return to invade again. The Kirin will leave Earth in peace, and Earth will be left in peace by the Kirin. Nathan thought about this offer. It was what humanity wanted. The aliens would leave. The invasion would end. Humanity would be safe. But Nathan also understood something deeper. This was a moment when humanity could show the galaxy what kind of species they were. They could show mercy to a defeated enemy. I accept your terms, Nathan said. You will withdraw all your forces from Earth within 30 days. You will leave behind any wounded that cannot travel. Humans will care for them. You will provide the location of all your weapons and supplies still in Earth's oceans. You will never return to invade Earth again. Do you accept these terms? Vasek stood and looked out the window at the deep ocean. I accept, he said. Your species is dangerous, Commodore. You are more dangerous than we understood, but you are also honorable. You did not destroy us when you could have. You gave us a chance to leave with our lives. The Kirin will remember this. We will tell other species about humanity. We will tell them that humans are not to be trifled with, but also that humans have honor. Nathan extended his hand again, and Vasek shook it. The war was over, not with complete victory for humanity, but with a peace that both sides could accept. Within hours, messages went out to all submarines and all naval forces. The invasion was over. The Kirin were withdrawing. The submarines had won. They had defended Earth, and now Earth would be safe. On the surface of the planet, celebrations began. In cities and towns all over the world, people came together to celebrate their survival. They did not know all the details of what had happened in the deep ocean. They did not know about all the battles and all the submarines. But they knew that human courage had saved them. They knew that submarines had defeated an alien invader. And they knew that humanity had proven itself to be a species worthy of surviving in a dangerous universe. Nathan returned to the surface and was greeted as a hero. But he knew that the real heroes were the submarine captains and their crews. They were the ones who had fought in the darkness. They were the ones who had risked their lives every single day. They were the ones who had stopped the invasion. Nathan was just the person who had ended it through negotiation. 6 months had passed since the Kirin ships left Earth's orbit. The last alien vessel disappeared into space on a cold morning in late spring. Millions of people watched on screens as the final bioship made its way back to the stars. The invasion was truly over. Humanity had survived. The submarines had saved them all. Commodore Nathan Cooper stood on a beach in Virginia and looked out at the ocean. The war had changed him. It had changed everyone. The water looked peaceful now, but Nathan knew there were submarines out there in the deep, still patrolling, still watching, still ready to defend. The threat from the Kirin might be gone, but the lessons from the war would never be forgotten. The United Nations had declared a holiday to honor the submariners. It was called Submarine Defense Day, and it was celebrated on the anniversary of the first battle. Statues of submarines were being built in cities all over the world. The submarine captains were being called heroes. Schools were teaching children about the invasion and how submarines had saved humanity. But the real changes were happening in deeper and more important ways. The Navy had received more money than ever before. Submarine programs that had been considered low priority were suddenly given top priority. New submarines were being built. New weapons were being developed. New tactics were being learned and taught. The submarines had proven their value in a way that no amount of argument could have done. In Norfolk, Virginia, Captain Derek Hughes was training the next generation of submarine officers. He had been promoted to admiral and given the responsibility of teaching future commanders. Derek remembered every battle, every moment of the war. He remembered the fear and the courage. He remembered the friends who had died. He wanted to make sure that the young officers learned not just the tactics of submarine warfare, but also the responsibilities that came with commanding a submarine. Admiral Derek Hughes stood in front of a class of young officers and looked at their eager faces. Submarine warfare is different from all other kinds of warfare, he told them. When you are in a submarine, you are alone in a way that no other soldier is alone. You are in a metal box at the bottom of the ocean. Above you are thousands of feet of water. Around you is darkness. Your only connection to the rest of the world is radio and sonar. You and your crew are truly alone. The young officers listened carefully. They understood that Hughes was telling them something important. But when you are alone, Hughes continued, you are also powerful. A submarine can change the course of history. A submarine can defend a nation. A submarine can defeat an enemy that seems impossible to defeat. During the Kirin invasion, submarines stopped an alien force that had technology superior to ours. We did not win because our weapons were better. We won because we understood something that the aliens did not. We understood how to use the ocean itself as a weapon. We understood how to hide, how to wait, how to strike. These are the lessons you must learn. Captain Lisa Martinez had left active duty, but was working as a consultant for the Navy. She was helping to develop new submarine detection systems. The Kirin technology had been studied carefully by human scientists. Some of it had been adapted for human use. Lisa understood how important it was to take what humans had learned from the invasion and use it to make submarines even better. In the Pacific, Captain Paul Garrity was commanding a new submarine class that was being built specifically to fight advanced alien technology. The submarine was faster, quieter, and more heavily armed than any submarine that had ever been built. Garrity knew that the Kirin might return someday, or other alien species might come. Humanity had to be ready. At the Naval Academy, Commodore Nathan Cooper was teaching military strategy and leadership. He spent his days with young sailors who wanted to become officers. He taught them about the invasion, about the decisions that had to be made, about the burden of command. Many of his students wanted to serve in submarines because of what the submarines had done during the war. Nathan told them the truth about submarine warfare. It is not glamorous, he said. It is cold, dark, and dangerous. You will spend months underwater without seeing the sun. You will be far from your families. You will miss birthdays and holidays. But you will also be part of something important. You will be part of the force that protects your nation and your world. The Kirin invasion had changed international relations too. Nations that had been enemies for decades began to work together. Russia, China, the United States, and European nations all coordinated their submarines during the war. This cooperation continued after the war ended. The submarine forces of different countries began sharing information and training together. The common threat had brought humanity together. Admiral Catherine Moore retired from active service 6 months after the invasion ended. She had spent her whole career preparing for challenges like this. She had studied every possible scenario. She had trained thousands of officers. And when the moment came, she had been ready. Her leadership had saved millions of lives. At her retirement ceremony, Moore was given the highest military honors. She received medals and awards. But what meant the most to her was a simple plaque that the submarine captains had given her. It was made from salvaged metal from a destroyed Kieran ship. On the plaque were the names of every submarine captain who had fought in the war, and at the top it said, "To the Admiral who led us to victory in the darkness." Moore held the plaque and thought about all the sailors who had died in the war. 327 human sailors had given their lives to stop the invasion. They would be remembered. Every submarine would carry their names. Every sailor would know what they had sacrificed. The oceans had also changed because of the war. The Kieran weapons had damaged some areas of the ocean floor. Fish populations had moved to new places. Marine biologists were studying these changes carefully. Some of the changes were negative, but some were actually beneficial. The disruption had allowed fish species to move into new territories and find new food sources. Life in the ocean was adapting to the damage, just as it had adapted to many changes over millions of years. In a memorial park in Washington, D.C., a monument was being built to honor all those who died in the invasion. It showed a submarine rising from the ocean with the sun breaking over the horizon. Beneath the statue, there would be a wall listing the names of every person who died. Soldiers, sailors, and civilians who lost their lives. When the Kieran tried to invade Earth, millions of people would visit this monument over the years and remember what had happened. Nathan Cooper stood in front of the memorial one day and thought about the future. The Kieran were gone. The invasion was over. But the message was clear. Humanity was not alone in the universe. There were other intelligent species out there. Some might be friendly, some might be hostile. Humanity had to be ready for anything. The submarines would be ready. The submarines had proven that humans could defend their world against forces that seemed impossible to defeat. The submarines had proven that intelligence, courage, and understanding of one's environment could overcome technology and raw power. Nathan looked at the unfinished monument and imagined what it would look like when it was complete. People from all over the world would come to remember. They would remember the sailors who had fought in the darkness. They would remember the submarines that had saved them. They would remember that in humanity's darkest hour, they had found the strength and courage to survive. The sun was setting over the city, and Nathan walked slowly back toward his car. He thought about all the submarine crews still on patrol in the deep oceans of the world. They were vigilant. They were ready. They would never let another invasion force come close to Earth without resistance. Humanity had learned a lesson from the Kieran invasion. The lesson was that they were stronger than they thought. They were braver than they knew. They were capable of defending themselves against any threat, no matter how powerful or advanced. And as long as submarines sailed the oceans and brave sailors manned their stations, Earth would always have defenders in the darkness beneath the waves. The war was over, but the vigil continued. And it would continue for as long as humans existed to keep watch over their world and their oceans. 2 years after the Kieran invasion ended, Captain James Rodriguez was commanding a new type of submarine. It was faster, quieter, and more advanced than anything that had existed before the war. The submarine was called the USS Guardian, and it represented everything humanity had learned from fighting an alien enemy in Earth's oceans. James was 39 years old, and he had joined the Navy right after the invasion ended. He had watched the war from shore, seeing submarines fight aliens on television screens. He had been inspired by what the submariners had done. Now he was one of them, and he took his responsibilities very seriously. The USS Guardian was patrolling the Atlantic Ocean on a routine mission. The war with the Kieran was over, but the Navy still maintained constant submarine patrols. No one knew if the Kieran would return. No one knew if other alien species might come. The submarines had to be ready for anything. James was reviewing reports when his sonar officer, a young man named Stephen Chen, called out with excitement in his voice. "Captain, we have a contact. It is big, but it does not match any database signature we have. James immediately moved to the sonar station. His heart started beating faster. 2 years without any alien contact, and now something was showing up on sonar that they could not identify. Was it the Kirin coming back? Was it a new species? James had trained for this moment, but the reality of it felt different from the training. Get me a clear reading, James commanded. I want to know everything about this contact. The sonar operators worked quickly. The image on the screen became clearer. It was huge, even bigger than a Kirin bioship. But it was different in shape. It looked more like a whale than a ship. And it was moving slowly, not fast like a military vessel would move. Captain, I think it is a whale, Stephen said uncertainly. A very large whale. Much larger than normal, but it looks like a whale. James looked at the sonar image again and realized Stephen was probably right. The shape did look like a whale. The way it was moving through the water looked like an animal movement, not a ship movement. But something about it did not feel quite right. James had learned to trust his instincts during the war. Take us closer, James said, but stay quiet and stay hidden. I want to observe this creature before we make any decisions about what it is. The USS Guardian moved slowly toward the whale. As they got closer, James ordered the submarine to use the external cameras. A large screen lit up in the control room, and James saw something that made his blood run cold. It was not a whale. It was not a natural creature. It was a machine designed to look like a whale. And it had markings on its side, human markings, American military markings. James understood immediately what had happened. This was one of the new exploration submarines that the Navy had been testing. It was a deep ocean research vessel, designed to be invisible to normal detection systems. It had been reported lost 6 months ago with a crew of 12 people inside. It is one of ours, James said quietly, but it is dead. There is no power, no movement, no life signs. The crew of the USS Guardian worked carefully to approach the dead submarine. When they got close enough, they could see that there had been an accident. The hull was cracked. Water had gotten inside. The crew was all dead. They had been dead for months. James ordered his crew to send a recovery signal back to the Navy. The USS Guardian would have to tow the dead submarine back to port so that the Navy could investigate what had happened. The crew had trained for many situations, but this was different. This was not battle. This was tragic. As they began the slow process of connecting the dead submarine to the USS Guardian, James thought about the 12 sailors who had died. They had volunteered for a dangerous mission. They had been exploring the deep ocean when something went wrong, and they had died alone in the darkness. 3 days later, the USS Guardian arrived at a naval port with the dead submarine in tow. The Navy launched a complete investigation. Engineers and scientists examined every part of the submarine. They found that a seal in the deep diving system had failed. Water had gradually leaked inside. The crew had tried to repair it, but they had not been able to stop the leak. They had died as the submarine slowly filled with water. It was a terrible accident, but it was not the fault of the submarine design or the crew training. Sometimes bad things happened, no matter how prepared you were. Sometimes equipment failed. Sometimes people died despite their best efforts. The Navy held a memorial service for the 12 sailors. The service was attended by the commanding officers of all the submarines in the fleet. It was attended by Admiral Derek Hughes and Admiral Catherine Moore, who had come out of retirement to pay their respects. It was attended by families of the lost sailors who grieved for their loved ones. James stood at attention during the service and thought about something he had learned during the war. The submarines had won against the Kirin, but many submarines had been damaged in the fighting. Many sailors had died. The war had been costly in lives and in equipment. The peace that followed had been hard won. Now, 2 years later, the Navy was still losing sailors, not to enemy action, but to accidents and the dangers of the deep ocean. James understood that submarine duty was inherently dangerous. You were taking a machine to places where humans could not survive without that machine. If something went wrong, you died. There was no rescue. There was no escape. You had to be perfect, and sometimes perfect was not enough. After the memorial service, James visited the families of the lost sailors. He wanted to tell them what heroic work their loved ones had been doing. He wanted them to know that their family members had been serving their country with honor and courage, even if they had died in an accident instead of in combat. One of the families was the Chen family. Their son, Daniel Chen, had been the submarine's chief engineer. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Chen, was grieving deeply. James talked to her and told her about Daniel's work, about how skilled he had been, about how he had tried to save his submarine and his crew even as water was filling the compartments. He was very brave, James told Mrs. Chen. He did everything he could to save his submarine. He did everything he could to save his crew. But sometimes, no matter how brave you are, you cannot fight against the ocean. The ocean is more powerful than any person. Mrs. Chen cried and thanked James for telling her about her son's last moments. She asked James to promise that he would be careful when he was in the ocean. James promised that he would. Back on the USS Guardian, James gathered his crew together. They had all heard about the lost submarine and the 12 sailors who had died. James wanted to make sure his crew understood something important. "We are the defenders of the ocean," James said to his crew. "We fight against enemies and we explore places that others cannot go. But we also have a responsibility to respect the ocean and to respect the dangers it presents. We lost 12 good sailors because a seal failed and water got inside their submarine. We will not let that happen to us. We will maintain our equipment perfectly. We will check and recheck everything. We will be ready for anything the ocean throws at us." The crew nodded. They understood what their captain was telling them. They were not just sailors. They were guardians. They were protectors. And they had a responsibility to return home alive so that they could protect others. In the years to come, the Navy would learn from every submarine accident. New equipment would be developed. New training programs would be created. The submarines would become even safer and more advanced. But the basic truth would never change. Submarine duty was dangerous. It always had been dangerous. It always would be dangerous. James Rodriguez commanded the USS Guardian for 4 more years. During that time, he lost no crew members to accidents or to enemy action. His submarine became known as the safest and most effective submarine in the entire fleet. When James finally retired from active duty, he had served with honor and distinction, but he never forgot the 12 sailors who had died on the lost submarine. He never forgot Mrs. Chen's tears. He never forgot the lesson that the ocean was more powerful than any technology, and that respect for that power was the key to survival. The submarines continued their patrols. The sailors continued their duty, and the oceans of Earth continued to be guarded by the brave men and women who understood that sometimes the greatest enemy was not an alien invasion, but the ocean itself, and the need to always be ready, always be vigilant, and always be willing to sacrifice everything for those you love and the nation you serve.